All right, let's dive into the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak.
Yeah, it's a pretty complex event.
Definitely, and we're going to try to really unpack it together using this article called
The 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak.
A Global Failure and the Untold Story of Its Spread.
Hmm.
Going beyond the headlines and really trying to see how this outbreak became a global crisis.
Yeah, we're going to look at not just the medical side of things, but the human stories.
The human impact.
Yeah, the cultural clashes and even like the systemic failures that all kind of played a part.
Totally. The article takes us right to the small village, Meliandou, in Guinea, December 2013.
Okay.
And it's where a one-year-old boy, Emile Umaner, he's playing with friends, and they found a hollow tree just filled with bats.
Wow.
Sadly, that seemingly innocent encounter kind of marked the beginning of this global health crisis.
Oh, wow.
Emile became what they call patient zero.
Mm.
I'm kind of curious, what makes bats so significant in this whole story?
So bats are actually known as a reservoir for the Ebola virus.
What does that mean?
It means they carry the virus, but don't get sick from it.
Oh, interesting.
And in a lot of cultures, bats are also a food source. So you can see how that creates a dangerous overlap between human behavior and a highly contagious virus.
That is a chilling point. And the article then explains that Emile's sister, his pregnant mother, and his grandmother all contracted the virus.
Oh, no.
And his grandmother then traveled to a local hospital for treatment, unknowingly carrying the virus with her,
Oh, wow.
further contributing to its spread.
It's kind of amazing how interconnected our world is, right? People travel for work, for family, for healthcare.
Yeah,
This mobility can be a double-edged sword.
for sure.
It connects us,
Yeah.
but it can also spread disease very quickly.
And to make matters worse, at first, doctors thought Emile and his family had cholera or malaria,
Oh,
not Ebola.
Hmm.
And the symptoms can be so similar in the early stages.
Right.
And because of that misdiagnosis, valuable time was lost.
That's crucial time that could have been used for containment.
Yeah, early detection and isolation are absolutely vital with Ebola. It spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids.
Right.
And by the time authorities had identified it as Ebola, it was March 2014, the virus had already really taken hold in the region.
Yeah, and that's when Doctors Without Borders,
Yeah.
or MSF,
MSF.
yeah, they established a field hospital right in the outbreak's epicenter.
Okay.
And the situation they found was alarming.
What did MSF find when they got there?
I mean, they found an outbreak that was far from contained. It was spreading rapidly.
Across multiple regions.
Yeah, overwhelming the local healthcare systems.
Wow.
MSF, they have a lot of experience with Ebola, but even they lacked the resources to control this one on their own.
So they were sending out warnings.
Urgent warnings, but initially the world just wasn't listening.
So the world already had some knowledge of Ebola. Why was the response to this outbreak so delayed and disorganized?
Well, the article suggests several reasons.
Okay.
First, the sheer scale and speed of this outbreak caught the World Health Organization, WHO, off guard. They'd managed smaller outbreaks before. But this one was different.
Different how?
Well, they were underfunded, their response was poorly organized, and there was just a lack of coordination between international agencies in those first few months, really crucial months.
Yeah, and the article also shares the story of Luis Camano,
Okay.
who unknowingly carried the virus from Guinea into Sierra Leone.
Mm.
And this wasn't a unique situation either.
No, definitely not.
People move pretty freely between these countries, which makes containing a virus like this immensely difficult.
Louise's story is like a clear example of how quickly a virus can spread beyond borders.
Right.
And the fact that Sierra Leone wasn't quickly informed about her illness, it allowed the virus to spread undetected for even longer.
Wow, that's
These coordinated responses
Yeah.
across borders, they're absolutely essential, especially in regions with these interconnected communities.
So the domino effect is terrifying. What else contributed to the rapid spread within these countries?
Well, here's where things get a little bit complex.
Okay.
We have to think about the role of traditional burial practices in Ebola transmission.
How so?
Well, in many West African cultures, washing and preparing the body of the deceased is an act of love and respect.
Right.
But with Ebola, this practice unintentionally helps spread the virus.
That's a heartbreaking conflict. The virus is present in bodily fluids even after death.
Yes, even after death.
Wow.
And the article highlights this really tragic story of Mendinor, a traditional healer in Sierra Leone,
Okay.
whose funeral actually became a super spreader event.
Oh, wow.
The mourners, who lovingly participated in his burial, unaware of the risks, carried the virus back to their own communities,
Oh, no.
igniting these new chains of infection.
It makes you realize how challenging it must have been to balance public health messaging with those deeply ingrained cultural beliefs.
Exactly. Some communities relied on these traditional beliefs about healing,
Right.
or they viewed foreign doctors with suspicion. It was difficult to get the message across about how to protect themselves from the virus.
So how do you effectively communicate that information?
Right. It's a tough question.
All respecting these local customs and building trust.
It's not just about science and medicine. It's about understanding people.
And building bridges instead of walls.
Yeah, and that sadly happened too often in these early stages of the outbreak.
So we've seen the spark, that slow global response and these cultural factors at play. What about those major global failures the article mentions in the title? Where did the system break down on that larger scale?
Well, one of the most glaring failures was that delayed and disorganized response from the WHO,
Right.
which we touched on earlier. But there's this shocking story about the Sierra Leone government's response.
Whoa.
They took over a month to even acknowledge the crisis in their border villages,
A whole month.
even though organizations like MSF were desperately trying to warn them.
What was the holdup?
That's the baffling part. We can only speculate.
Yeah.
But the article suggests that political considerations might have been at play rather than a focus on public health. And to make matters worse, instead of working with organizations like MSF, who had proven experience with Ebola,
Right.
the Sierra Leone government chose to partner with an American company called Metabiota.
And I'm assuming they had extensive experience with Ebola.
That's where it gets really concerning. Metabiota had no direct experience in managing Ebola outbreaks.
Oh, wow.
It's a decision that, likely cost lives
Yeah.
and raises serious questions about the government's priorities during such a critical time.
It's heartbreaking to think about those missed opportunities.
Yeah.
The delays, the missteps that allowed this virus to spiral out of control. The article says that by the time the U.S. and the U.K. stepped in to provide resources, it was too late for containment.
Tragically. Yeah.
So the outbreak ultimately claimed over 11,000 lives.
With countless others infected.
Wow. And the impact on the region, just devastating in terms of human loss and the long-term economic and social consequences. This wasn't just a health crisis. This was a humanitarian catastrophe.
Absolutely.
This is a lot to process. We've seen the devastating consequences of this outbreak. But every crisis, no matter how tragic, can be a learning opportunity. So when we come back, let's explore what the world learned from this outbreak and what lasting impacts it's had. It's hard to imagine anything positive coming out of a tragedy like this, but the article does emphasize the lessons learned from the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak.
Yeah.
It feels like a crucial part of understanding how to prevent something like this from happening again.
You're absolutely right. Every crisis, no matter how devastating, can teach us something. The world was forced to confront some hard truths about its ability to handle a large-scale viral emergency.
So what were some of the most crucial lessons that emerged from this experience?
One of the most obvious, but maybe overlooked before the outbreak, is the critical importance of preparedness. You've probably heard the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Right.
Well, that applies here on a global scale.
So what does that look like in practice? How can we actually be more prepared for something like this?
Well, imagine if there had been, like, a readily available stockpile of protective gear, like masks and suits. Or if medical teams were specifically trained and ready to be deployed at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Those kinds of preparations could have made a world of difference.
So we need to be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly, when it comes to these viral threats.
And it sounds like that preparedness needs to happen on a global scale, not just within individual countries.
Absolutely. We need a coordinated global effort. Viruses don't respect borders.
Right.
As we saw with Ebola spreading between Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia.
Yeah.
Information sharing, contact tracing, the efficient allocation of resources, all these things need to happen quickly and seamlessly across international lines.
The article also talked about the need for cultural sensitivity when responding to outbreaks. What are your thoughts on that?
Remember the example of the funeral practices we discussed.
Yeah.
We can't just ignore or dismiss cultural practices, even if they seem to contradict our scientific understanding.
Right.
Imagine being told you can't mourn your loved ones in a way that's been practiced for generations.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that respect both cultural beliefs and public health needs.
So it's about collaboration and understanding.
Yeah.
Not just imposing our ways of thinking on other cultures.
Precisely. We need to work with communities, learn from their knowledge, and build trust.
Right.
The article highlights that local communities often have valuable insights that can actually help us fight outbreaks more effectively.
Another point the article makes is that this outbreak really exposed the fragility of the healthcare systems in the affected regions.
Yeah.
What needs to change there?
You're right. Many of these countries were already dealing with limited resources,
Mm,
shortages of healthcare workers, and weak public health infrastructure.
right.
The Ebola outbreak just overwhelmed them.
Mm.
It's not enough to just provide temporary aid during a crisis.
So building capacity, not just offering a Band-Aid solution.
Exactly. We need to empower countries to take ownership of their own health security.
Yeah.
Remember, global health is interconnected. An outbreak anywhere is a potential threat everywhere.
The article also discusses this idea of global solidarity and accountability.
Right.
It seemed like there was a lot of finger-pointing after the outbreak, with many criticizing the international community's slow and inadequate response.
There's no doubt that the response was flawed. We saw delays, confusion, lack of coordination.
Yeah,
Organizations like the WHO need to be held accountable for their actions.
right.
We need clear mechanisms for mobilizing resources quickly and effectively.
So it's about learning from our mistakes
Yeah,
and working together to prevent them from happening again. This outbreak was a wake-up call, wasn't it?
absolutely. It was a wake-up call.
Mhm.
It highlighted that our fates are interconnected.
Right.
We can't isolate ourselves and hope for the best.
Yeah.
We need to work together as a global community to strengthen our defenses.
This all sounds incredibly important, but what can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming,
It does.
but there are things we can do. First and foremost, stay informed,
Okay.
understand the risks, learn about how diseases spread, and follow public health recommendations. You've already taken a great step by doing this deep dive.
So knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
We can also advocate for change.
Okay.
Support organizations working to improve global health security. Contact your elected officials to let them know these issues are important to you, and hold those in power accountable.
So be aware, be engaged, and use our voices to demand better preparedness and a more coordinated global response.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in protecting ourselves and each other from these threats. Remember, the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak was a tragedy, but it also sparked a global conversation about preparedness, equity, and our shared responsibility for global health.
The article concludes with a discussion about the aftermath of the outbreak and its lasting impact on the world. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. What are your thoughts?
It's hard to believe that something as devastating as the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak could have a positive impact, but you mentioned it sparked a global conversation about our approach to infectious diseases.
Right.
What's changed since then?
Yeah, the world may have overcome that specific Ebola outbreak, but you're right, it's just one chapter in a much larger story.
Hmm.
The threat of emerging infectious diseases, it's a constant,
Yeah.
and the fight against them is never truly over.
So in a way, we're always in a state of preparing for the next potential outbreak.
In a sense, yes.
Hmm.
And the lessons from that 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak,
Right.
they've been invaluable in shaping our responses to subsequent outbreaks,
Yeah.
including the COVID-19 pandemic.
That makes sense. There were definitely parallels between the two. That urgent need for a rapid response.
Yeah.
The challenges of international cooperation.
The difficulties in communicating public health messages effectively.
So true.
And of course, the inequalities in healthcare systems around the world.
Yeah. It's almost as if the Ebola outbreak served as this harsh but necessary dress rehearsal,
Yeah.
revealing these vulnerabilities in our global health security system.
So looking back, the legacy of the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak is complex.
Yeah, it is.
On one hand, it's this tragic reminder of what happens when we're unprepared and fail to act quickly.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's been a catalyst for progress.
I agree.
It forced us to confront our weaknesses and start building a more resilient global health system.
I completely agree. The real challenge lies in translating those lessons into concrete actions.
Right, so how do we make sure we're better prepared for the next inevitable outbreak,
Yeah.
which could be even more challenging than Ebola or COVID-19?
That's a great question.
It feels like such a daunting question. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with acknowledging that this is a shared responsibility.
Yep.
Governments and global health organizations,
Yeah.
they have these crucial roles to play, but it can't stop there.
Right.
We all have to participate.
So what can individuals like me do to contribute to this global effort?
Well, you've already taken a step in the right direction
Okay.
by educating yourself about this 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak. Staying informed is crucial.
Right.
We need to understand the risks of infectious diseases,
Okay.
how they spread,
Yeah.
and how to protect ourselves and others.
So it's about being aware
Yeah,
and making informed decisions in our daily lives.
exactly.
Hmm.
And we can advocate for change.
Okay.
You can support organizations working on global health security.
Right.
Make your voice heard by contacting your elected officials.
Yeah.
Hold those in power accountable for their decisions and actions.
So it sounds like it's about recognizing that our individual choices and actions are all connected to this bigger picture of global health.
Yeah,
We all have a role to play in building a healthier and safer world.
that's a great way to put it. We can't view ourselves as separate from this issue.
Hmm.
Our health and well-being are interconnected.
Yeah,
And the fight against these infectious diseases, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
for sure.
It takes this sustained effort,
Yeah.
collaboration, and a commitment to learning and adapting.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. It's been sobering to learn about the human cost of outbreaks and the failures that contributed to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also been inspiring to see how the world has learned from those mistakes
Yeah,
and is working to build a more resilient and equitable global health system.
it's important to remember that even in the face of tragedy, there's hope.
Right.
The human spirit is incredibly resilient. We have this capacity to come together,
Yeah.
innovate, learn from our past.
Right.
The question is, will we use that knowledge and resilience to create a better future?
That's a powerful question for us all to consider. What will we do with this knowledge? How will we ensure that the sacrifices made and the lessons learned during the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak are not in vain?
The future of global health security depends on the choices we make today. It depends on our willingness to learn from the past, collaborate across borders,
Yeah.
invest in a healthier and more equitable future for everyone.
Well, thank you for guiding me through this deep dive.
Of course.
It's been a truly insightful and thought-provoking experience.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
Yeah.
Remember, knowledge is power, and together we can make a difference.